Hi, everyone, and welcome to Housing-Based Case Management Training for Moving In. My name is Ashley Halliday-Schmandt, and I am the Director of the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness, and I am partnering with the Michigan Balance of State Continuum of Care to offer some trainings related to exceptional housing-based case management services. So again, here's our training outline. This training will be focusing on number 2, moving in. So all the things related to moving a client into housing on your program. Let's skip ahead to moving in. Here we are, moving in. So this training is not going to focus on housing identification or landlord recruitment and all that sort of thing. A lot of that stuff you can find in the Rapid Rehousing Core Components training, and it can be applied to really any housing program. Okay, so we won't get into that. This will talk about more of the mechanics and the best practices rather around supporting someone through the moving in process. So let's get started. For housing to be considered, there has to be some sort of an inspection that takes place. Now that's going to depend on the type of program that the participant is going into. It might be a housing quality standards inspection. It might be habitability inspection. Whatever the program the person is being housed in requires, that's the inspection you do. All of that to say, you need to get eyes on the unit prior to moving someone in. Another great thing, another tip you can use here is to print out, you can find them online, really anywhere. I think maybe even the Rapid Rehousing Toolkit on the HUD Exchange might have one, but you can just Google rental inspection checklist or something like that, and it really goes through where you and the client and the landlord can walk through the unit during the lease signing, and some landlords have this, some don't, and check off the things that, the condition, you're really examining the condition of the unit that you're moving the person into. So you can say, oh, the blinds are broken on the bedroom window, so that later, if the participant is moving out or another inspection takes place, again, depending on the program, the client won't be charged for that. So that's just kind of a best practice to do anyway with rentals. In my experience of renting housing for many years of my life, something like that was typically used by the landlord, but not always. So good thing to have on hand in your programs. The lease, there must be a lease in place. Again, the terms of that lease depend on the program, but has to be a lease in place. Housing must be permanent. The client must have privacy and controls access to his or her unit. And then finally, it must meet FMR or rent reasonableness. Again, terms depending on the program. So whatever program type it is, the rules and regulations around rent will be in that. So let's get into it a little more. These are best practices around defining your program and role with the landlord and with the tenant. So a really good idea and a tip I would give you is provide as much to writing to the landlord as you can about what services you're going to offer. And one of the bullet points here really says provide contact info for yourself to the landlord, as well as when, how, and why to contact you, as opposed to contacting the tenant or someone else. Putting that stuff in writing is a great accountability measure, and it's really telling the landlord, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. The other end of that is you actually have to do it. So when a landlord calls you, you must be responsive. Now, there are boundaries and a lot of boundary setting that takes place within that scope. So that's why you're going to give something to the landlord saying, this is when, how, and why you can contact me. You can't contact me when I'm not working, on the weekends, at night, on my cell phone, my personal cell phone, okay, if you don't have on-call and that sort of thing. I will say that effective housing-based case management does not typically happen between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Things come up that should be addressed in off hours, on weekends, on holidays, when you're on vacation, that sort of thing. So having something built into your program, whether it be on call, a message system, whatever works for your program and your participants and your landlords. But I would just say, a tip is to think about what that could look like to build that out. You want to make sure the landlord and the tenant know that you are a liaison, not a mini landlord. So when something breaks in the unit, there should be coaching provided to the tenant around how are we going to let the maintenance or landlord or whoever know about this. I don't need to be necessarily the one as the case manager being told that your sink is flooding. Okay. We want to make, or there's a fire in the kitchen. We want to make sure that the tenant knows how to deal with those sorts of things. And we want to make sure the landlord knows if there's a lease violation, they need to be the ones working with the tenant to establish the written violation of that. Now, what best practices would say is the landlord is going to contact you prior to the lease violation, or you contacting the landlord prior, so that you're all on the same page and that nothing is really a surprise. We don't want shocking things to happen. If someone's getting a lease violation, really, if you're doing this work really well, one of your tenants is getting a lease violation, you kind of already saw it coming usually. Okay, you're already working on it with the client. You see that it's an issue. It's not news to you necessarily. Okay, so best practice is there. Lots and lots of open communication between you, the landlord, and the tenant. You want to make sure the landlord knows you're providing in-home services depending on the client's need and acuity. That's a selling point in recruiting and keeping landlords. Not many other people in the open rental market have somebody coming in, again, not acting as a mini landlord, but acting as a liaison and providing support in the home. A lot of landlords just like the fact that you as a housing-based case manager will have eyes on the unit, and you'll be able to see issues before they become huge, intense situations that require a lease violation, right? So if you go in, you see that the garbage hasn't been taken out in a few days and it's piling over and there's trash on the ground, you can work with the client to address that before that amounts to a month of the trash not being taken out, rotting food, damage to the unit, and then a lease violation or potentially an eviction. Okay, so you're getting ahead of it by actually going in the unit and having eyes on the unit. And the best part of that is you get to work with the client or the tenant around what are the issues about. What does it really mean that you're not taking the trash out? Are you not here? Is someone else using the unit and making all the trash? Probably not, right? We have responsibilities as a tenant, and we talked about that in the training prior around core components of housing-based case management. The client is leading the conversation around what they think it means to be a good tenant. So if they said to keep my unit clean, you can kind of point back to that and say, well, this is how we do that. We take the trash out. Okay. We already talked about the providing contact info to the landlord. That's huge, huge, huge. The other thing I'll say in the exit planning process and training, this will come up, but when assistance, either rental assistance or case management assistance ends, you want to have something in writing that you're providing to the landlord saying, we're no longer providing rental assistance. The program participant has ended the program because they're self-sufficient, they're taking over the rent, whatever the case is. Again, you don't want that to be surprising to the landlord. You want to keep open communication with the landlord kind of all the time throughout the program participant stay. And then you'll work on establishing with the landlord what information is private and what information you can share with them. So we started something where we actually just put in our release of information packet, like their enrollment packet, to the program for a release for the landlord. And the client has the opportunity right then and there to say, these are the things I want you to share with the landlord. These are the things I don't. And obviously you have to share some things, like they're on this program, we're going to be paying the rent, we're providing support, blah, blah, there's some basic things. But outside of that, landlords tend to ask, oh, does this person have a drinking problem? Is this person dealing with mental health issues? Why don't they take out the trash all the time? Blah, blah, blah. It can go on and on. So you want to already have established before that happens what the communication plan is between you, the client, and the landlord, and what information you can really disclose to them. And you don't want that to be news to the client either. I've already talked about that through the release of information process. And then finally, your main goal here is to work to mediate issues. Again, that's not going to go on forever. You will not be there forever. So you want to, in mediation, every single opportunity you have is to coach the client on how they can handle this appropriately next time. And some coaching with the landlord helps too. So these are some best practices to use when housing folks. You only want to do move-ins on Mondays, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays. Never, ever, ever on a Friday if your program does not offer support on the weekends or at night. Now, if your program does, if you're kind of a 24/7 program or you just have on-call services, that's a little bit different. But we want to make sure that your housing-based case manager can follow up with the client the very next day after they've become housed, and then the day after that. Okay, we've made the mistake quite a few times of housing folks on a Friday, thinking everything was going to be okay if we followed up Monday. Usually it's not. Worst case scenario has happened a couple times. And we've actually had clients lose that housing unit within the first 24 hours because the support wasn't attached the very next day. Okay, so learn from our mistakes and house clients on Mondays, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays when you can ensure a few days of follow-up support after they move in. Only do one move-in per day. Locally, I don't know that we've had this issue. It depends on your capacity and your program size. An example of this, we were doing this, I was doing this work in Chicago, and it just so happened that we had 3 move-ins on one day. And we were, it's Chicago, we're stuck in traffic, we're trying to arrange moving, trucks and all of this. And it got to the point where we weren't able to do an effective job just because moving is a stressful process, both for the client and for the caseworker, the case manager. It's lengthy, there's a lot going on. Something typically goes wrong, whether it's things are being delivered at the wrong time, we can't find the key, the landlord isn't here on time, whatever the case is, you just want to have some cushion on both ends of that. So try to only do one per day. You want to discuss or role play the move-in before it actually happens. So a lot of prep work can go into talking with the client about what the move-in day will actually look like. Let them know, hey, it's probably going to be stressful. There's going to be a lot of things going on. We're going to have to go over the lease. We're going to have your furniture. We're going to have to go get certain things or whatever the case is. You want to role play that so it's not extremely overwhelming the day of. If you can, pick out furniture in advance, have it ready to go, have the moving, whether it's going to be you or somebody the client knows or you're paying someone, whatever. I know this can't always happen, but try to have as much of that done prior to move-in day. It just helps the day go a lot smoother. When looking at units, the client accompanies you to all apartment showings and you accompany the client. Okay, so if the client is doing most of the housing search, before you say, yes, this is a unit that will work with our program, you need to get inside that unit and have eyes on it, and vice versa. You are not the one deciding if a client's going to live somewhere. The client is. Okay, so if they have never seen a unit, they are not moving into it. Okay, this is client-based, trauma-informed approach. Clients have the choice in their housing. And the clients are assisted with the lease signing. So that that is also a best practice to have the case manager, the landlord, and the client right then and there at the lease signing to go over questions that anyone has. So on the actual day of move-in, do a walkthrough of the unit, assist the client in completing a damage assessment. So another good tip to do, and sometimes landlords or rental companies, property management companies already have something like this in place. However, sometimes they don't. So you can just Google it, rental damage assessment or rental move-in checklist, something like that. There's templates all over the place. And pull up something that you can use with your program that when the client moves in, you do a quick assessment of the unit. This isn't the inspection. This is is a doorknob broke? Is there a hole in the wall? Are the blinds working properly? Things like that, so that the client doesn't get charged or blamed for damages that were already existing in the unit prior to them moving in. You want to review building orientation and fire safety with the client. This applies a little bit more to like a apartment complex, where there's several floors, things like that, fire exits. But yeah, do a fair amount of orientation and safety planning with the client when they move in. Make sure all the locks and the keys work. And if I could bold this and just make it flashing, I probably could, but maybe I should have. On the screen, it would be discuss strategies for lost keys. This will happen. And in our experience in Northwest Michigan, it is not an if, but a when. It's when will someone lose their keys? And when they do, what will they do? What is the policy for that? Does the landlord charge them $100 every time they lose their key and get locked out? And how will they pay that? And what will we do? And how will the program support them in getting their key? What's a strategy around having a key where when you lock yourself out, what are you going to do? Does somebody else you trust have a key? I wouldn't recommend that. Do you hide a key? What do you do? So talking about that, and then who to call when, and how to crisis plan effectively. And that will be in the crisis plan training as well. We'll talk more about that. So here's all things lease signing and review. So it's important to review the lease with the landlord and the program participant. I like to try to get my hands on a copy of the lease prior to the actual day of lease signing. It can just be blank. It can say draft, whatever, just so I can take a good look at it first, and we can highlight areas that the client, any areas of concern or question that you or the client has, highlight those, take them to the actual lease signing meeting, and review them with the landlord. So you always want to do that. And then I like to, when we're doing the lease signing with the client and the landlord present, take another highlighter, make a copy, and highlight the things that are huge, like what are the procedures for lost keys? What happened, maintenance issues? What if your apartment's flooding? What do you do? What if your stove doesn't work anymore? What do you do? Things like that. Highlight those, give it back to the client so that they're not overwhelmed by a lease that's mostly legal jargon and not the huge things related to lease violations or what to do. Always come back to the lease when you're providing housing-based case management, and always be asking, how do you think this might impact your housing? Okay, so if it's a lease violation that you see happening or building up to happening, a good thing to say is, let's pull out the lease and see how you think this behavior might impact your housing. What would that look like if you did X, Y, or Z thing, never took out your trash? How do you think that'll impact your housing? Do you think you'll be able to stay here long term? And what are some ways that we can work around that? Okay. And then here we're going to talk about some ways to promote homemaking. So this can happen, most of the stuff happens over time, not right at move-in. We want to make the day of move-in as stress-free as possible. So if the lease signing is happening the same day that the client is moving in, we don't want to add 45 assessments to that same day. Okay. We want to gradually engage the client around housing-based case management services. And these are some of the ways you can do that to build the relationship a little bit better and also promote that this is their home. This is a client's home. It's not housing that you chose outside of them and placed them in. This is their place, and how do we make it like a home? So some ideas are baking cookies with them. Again, you don't have to do any of these, but these are just some tips. You can do all these, none of these, whatever. But I like providing them with a plant. You can buy plants so cheaply. You can go to Home Depot, Walmart, Meijer, anywhere, and just pick up, a $5 plant or less. And it gives them, we've seen some of our folks, I remember one guy in doing this work, he was on the streets for over 10 years, and this was the first place he had in 10 years. A very depressed, kind of gruff, grouchy type guy, and he used to sleep outside of our local senior center. And when the director of the senior center, he would sleep kind of on their shuffleboard courts outside. He was a rough sleeper, but when she found out he was getting housed, she gave him a house plant. He kept that thing alive for a very long time, and it gave him purpose and it gave him meaning every day. And it really, he kind of displayed it. He didn't take care of himself or even sometimes the rest of the unit very well. We had to do a lot of work and coaching with him, but man, did he take care of that plant. Okay. And it really just made him feel like, this is my place. This is my home. Giving them picture frames can help, helping them hang them on the wall, sticky putty to put posters on the wall so you're not like damaging the wall. Go grocery shopping with them, coaching around how to make meals last longer, activities to address boredom. So providing them like a move-in basket is huge. The move-in basket needs to include things that they can't usually buy with public assistance like food stamps. So you want to put in there paper towel, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, a mop, a broom, things like that they can't, if someone doesn't have income that they can't necessarily buy, things to stock up that you just don't think about until you move in and realize, oh, I don't have salt and pepper, or, things like that, helping them establish that over time. And then in that move-in basket, you can put things like cards, colored pencils, and an adult coloring book, books. You want to make sure that they have a TV or a radio. I can imagine kind of going from living in a congregate shelter or outside to going into housing on my own and having no noise, right? Like no radio, no TV. That would be a huge thing for me personally. So it just, kind of makes you feel like you're not alone or not isolated. And we've heard clients say that over and over again who live alone, that's key for them. Calendar is big. You can buy those really cheap. You can buy those at the Dollar Tree for $1. You might even be able to find them cheaper. I'm not sure, but we went into the Dollar Tree one day, purchased a ton of magnets and a ton of calendars and some dry erase markers. And, that was part of our move-in basket for clients. You want to help them understand that, when you're coming back next. And so put that calendar right on the fridge. So again, all just ideas to promote that and make the client feel like they're really at home. So that concludes the moving in basic training. Next, we'll talk about meaningful daily activities. So come back for that training, and thanks so much.